Welcome to Cord Cutting This Week, number 22, the show where we kind of talk about some of the biggest stories in cord cutting and my personal opinion on them. If you want to learn more about any of these stories, don't forget in the show notes down below is a full link to all the stories we talk about today. But hey, you may notice I have somebody new joining me today. Elias from AFTV News. If you're a long-term fan, you probably remember him from the podcast we did a few years ago as a regular co-host. Now he's back to join us today as a guest. Elias, can you tell us about yourself and AFTV News?
Hey, good to be here, Luke. It's been a while since I've actually been on camera, so it's actually good to get back into it. I had to wipe off the dust on my little webcam and connect my microphone and everything. But yeah, I run AFTVnews.com. It's a site where I mostly focus on Amazon Fire TV and Amazon Echo hardware and just trying to get people to get the most out of their products. We've kind of been doing things, I think, for around the same length of time. We both started right around that same time, so it's cool to always kind of get back into things together and do something together. It's always fun.
It's great to have you. Thanks for joining us. Hey, you joined at a perfect week because there's a ton of Amazon.
I know. Yeah, was it like 2 or 3 weeks ago we kind of started talking about doing this together, and then it just so happens that there's it's a perfect time for me to get on. I think because it's the stuff I cover the most essentially.
Well, hey, let's get into it. The first story is the biggest one. Amazon just announced a new line of 4K smart TVs powered by the Amazon Fire TV Edition OS, whatever they call that.
Yeah, the horribly named thing. It's technically it's whatever the television is. So like the Toshiba such and such hyphen Fire TV Edition. So that's the technical name, but it is a horrible name.
Yeah, I wish they would just call it the Fire TV Smart TV OS. That just, I don't know, it makes more sense to me, but I'm no expert. Looking at this story, there's a few key points to point out here. Number one, they talk about 4K but no HDR. Do you think there'll be HDR? What's happening here?
That was pretty disappointing. I was hoping at least they would drop HDR on there because they even said that it's 4K and HD models. So they're going to actually have, I think that means they're gonna have non 4K models. They actually have 1080p only models still, which kind of, it still makes sense because it's still, the brands involved, which we'll get into, are kind of on the budget end. So they probably still sell I would imagine the majority of their sales are probably still non 4K sets. So I'm not gonna, ding them for that. But yeah, the fact that they didn't mention HDR, I've been digging in Fire TV update code, source code for a while now, trying to find out more about these TVs, and I always check for that HDR because that will pop up in the source. I found these TVs are codenamed Kira, I believe, and I found it a few months ago, the first evidence of them, but I haven't been able to find anything about actual HDR support. That would be expected. Hopefully they bring it.
Especially with Roku rolling out their 6 series with TCL, which has got Dolby Vision HDR, all the bells and whistles you would want, at what is currently a similar price point to the Amazon Fire TVs. It just seems like it's a big step backwards from what their competition's doing.
Yeah. That's assuming they don't have HDR. I think there will be at least one set with HDR because, like you said, it's being included in even the lower budget TVs now. So, I still think they'll have it, but I guess maybe they just didn't want to reveal any specs whatsoever because it was really completely void of any specs at all. They didn't even mention screen sizes. The only thing they mentioned was 4K, and that's a given. I mean, if they don't release they said 11 models, at first are going to be released. At least that's the Best Buy side of things. Best Buy is going to sell 11 models exclusively in both the Toshiba models and Insignia, which is Best Buy's house brand. There might still be other manufacturers involved here, but this I think was the Best Buy announcement, the Best Buy side of things, which is significant.
Yeah, that's the other big part of this is Best Buy is teaming up with Amazon to sell these.
Yeah,
Amazon's always kind of struggled to get in stores for their smart TVs. They struck a deal with Insignia and Toshiba. I can't remember. Are those companies the same or are they separate companies?
They're separate. Toshiba picked up Toshiba, the Japanese Toshiba company, sold off their TV side basically to what are they called? Compal, I believe you've probably never heard of them. Most people have never heard of them. I literally, like, when the news broke, I went to Wikipedia and looked up Toshiba just to see, is Toshiba still a Toshiba company, or is it just like this name, like, you know, some of the other brands that we used to know that now are not really making the stuff that, you know, has their brand on it. But yeah, the Toshiba TVs are made by a Chinese manufacturer called Compal, and so yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing. Like, Philips will come out with a Roku TV. You got to look and realize Philips is now owned by this other company, and it's a pain in the neck for us, the reporters. But I think the interesting thing here is Insignia is dropping Roku TVs. They're going to go with the Fire. Roku TVs will still be sold at Best Buy through one of Roku's like 10 brands they have making them. But it's interesting to see Insignia. Looks like they've always been like the second tier brand in Roku. That people think of TCL, now RCA, some others. And it looks like Insignia wants to break free, kind of get the Fire TV name to themselves to kind of make a name for themselves in the United States. How do you think about that move?
Yeah, it is really significant. I mean, you know, it hurts, I think, you know, Roku more than anything, you know, and it's great for Amazon. The biggest question is whether it's going to pay off for Best Buy or not, because, you know, Fire TV OS or Fire TV Edition televisions are the newest member of the whole third-party OS on a manufacturer's TV. You know, it's kind of gaining in popularity. You've got Roku was the first one out there. I think they started in like 2014, and then Android TV jumped into that market in 2015, and then, you know, Amazon jumped in last year, 2017. And so it's, you know, the question is Best Buy going to benefit from running another manufacturer's OS, or running their own OS? They're probably better off with the other manufacturer. Now the question is, who do they choose? Maybe it's because Roku, like you were saying, they've got 10 manufacturers, you just said. That's big, you know, that's a lot to compete with, you know. There's nothing that Insignia is going to really stand out for, especially when they're not even like the top tier of those 10 manufacturers. So maybe it is, you know, best for them to kind of, you know, branch off and stand out a little bit more as the primary Fire TV operating system television.
Yeah, I can't blame them for saying, we're not really getting the same press we're on Roku TVs that RCA, and especially with TCL. TCL's just been kind of dominating the Roku TV market. For them to say, hey, you know, Amazon wants us to be one of their flagship partners, why not do that? Yeah,
definitely. I think, you know, taking that opportunity to, like you said, to be flagship anything is probably worth it, especially when you're considered one of the lower end budget brands.
Let's keep moving. There's another big Amazon story. DIRECTV Now has dropped support for first-gen Fire TVs and Fire Sticks. When this first happened, a lot of people were all excited thinking that the new app and DVR had come out. When you updated your Fire TV, Fire Stick, it gave you a screen saying, please go download the newest version of the DIRECTV Now app. Unfortunately for owners of first-gen devices, there wasn't one, and it left a lot of people upset. DIRECTV's Now Twitter came out and said, sorry for the inconvenience. In fact, you are correct. We are only supporting second gen and newer at this time. Any idea why DIRECTV Now would make this move?
First, to clarify that it is first gen Fire TV sticks, not all Fire TV sticks. So there is the second gen Fire TV sticks, and I think most people probably have the second gen. But regardless, I mean, honestly, there's no reason. There's no good reason for DIRECTV to drop support. I can almost see why they would do it for the first gen Fire TV stick, because that device is it's significantly weaker than the entire rest of the Fire TV line. The CPU is only a dual core, and it's a very slow dual core. It's just there's a significant difference there. The Fire TV one, the first gen Fire TV, which predates the first gen stick by a few months, that honestly there is no reason to not support that, because it's more powerful than the second generation Fire TV stick, which is still supported. So it's like, why support that? It seems like they almost just made an arbitrary cut, based on when the devices were released, as opposed to looking at what the device is capable of and whether it can actually run their software. I looked into it. I was trying to think about is there any legitimate reason that they would drop support. Actual technical reason. And the only difference between the Fire TV 1 and the Fire TV Stick 2, as far as actual technical specs, is that the Fire TV Stick 2 supports the H.265 HEVC hardware decoding, but that is absolutely not reason enough to drop support. The Fire TV 1 doesn't support that, but it's not like DirecTV is going to go strictly H.265 streams and drop all H.264 devices, because that would include literally every single iPhone, and that's a massive market, and they would never do that. Basically, most mobile devices are H.264 capable only devices, so there's really no reason, spec-wise. The Fire TV 1 and the Fire TV Stick 2 run the exact same operating system. They've got, similar actual hardware capabilities. It's really no reason. I mean, I think, personally, if I had to guess, they're just struggling to keep up. Their app is kind of considered to be one of the worst among, like, the Sling TVs and the Hulu Live TV and PlayStation View. Those are the big four. And their app is the worst reviewed one on the Fire TV platform. So it seems like it's got the most issues, and it seems like they just don't have the resources to make their app better. So maybe they're deciding, let's cut off device support to try to cut back on what we have to do. That's my best guess, but it really doesn't make sense, because there's nothing special you have to do for the first gen Fire TV, at least.
Yeah, this definitely feels, like you said, an arbitrary move. And I think what surprises a lot of people is the size of these teams with DirecTV Now, Sling TV, PlayStation View are much smaller than you would think they are. These aren't massive teams out there with hundreds of programmers plucking away to roll out apps to different devices. And I wonder if you are right. There is a need to say, hey, we got 5 guys on the programming team. We got all these devices we want to support. At some point, something's got to get cut. Why the Fire TV? I don't know. I like what Hulu did. It's like, hey, we got this new Hulu. A lot of people hate it. Some people like it. But if your device isn't supported, you still get the older version. You may not get some of the features, but you can still access Hulu. And I wish DirecTV Now did that. I would have understood this more if the DVR had come out publicly and it was like, hey, the DVR's out, the new 2.0 app is out. Unfortunately, we found maybe a glitch with the first gen, or it's not handling it the way we wanted. So if you have a first gen Fire TV, you still have to use the old app without the DVR. If you want the DVR, upgrade. But to cut it off before you release the new 2.0 app, it may not have been very well reviewed, but it at least worked. It allowed people to subscribe to your service, pay you money. I don't understand it.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen other companies do basically just exactly that, where they keep their old app alive and just let it sit there and kind of bit rot essentially, but let the people keep using it while it's still working, and then release a new app and go from there. But I mean, you make a good point. It's possible that there are features, there are capabilities that they're working on right now that they haven't released yet, that are going to come, that for whatever reason wouldn't work on the older generation of hardware. Like I said, if you're going to support the Fire TV Stick 2, there is absolutely no reason not to support the Fire TV 1. Again, the Stick 1, I can see that just because it's weaker. For example, even when Amazon released their Silk browser for Fire TV devices, they didn't release it for the first generation Fire TV Stick because they knew it just performed poorly there. They waited, they optimized the code a little bit, then they released it later. Maybe, hopefully, we'll see something similar where they're cutting things off now because they're anticipating poor performance on those older devices. Again, I keep going back to it. It doesn't make any sense, because there's no way the Fire TV 1 is going to perform worse than the Fire TV Stick 2, which is still supported. But still, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe after they release on the newer generation hardware, they'll come back and optimize for the older generation and then release for there. We can hope.
This happens sometimes on Roku, and it makes more sense there to go back to the Roku 1 and first gen Roku 2, because they run a slightly different OS. They weren't updated to, I think, 8.6 right now, or is that 7.6? I can't remember. But they run different OS with slightly different features, so like the new Hulu app can't quite take advantage of the software, because the same plugins, same hooks aren't there. So they get the older version. Netflix does the same thing in like the first gen and second gen Roku 1 and Roku 2. because the physical software they need is not on the device. I don't think that's the issue right here with the first gen Fire TV.
No, not at all. That I would absolutely give them credit for. If the operating system was, even if it was just a different version but very similar, like for because Fire TV or Fire OS it runs off of Android, and so if, for example, the two were running different variants of Android, actually like the base Android version was different, that is full legitimate reason to drop support for one and keep going with the other, because that involves additional, a lot of additional programming to support two different OSs. But the Fire TV 1 and the Fire TV Stick 2, which both run the identical exact same version of Fire OS. The only different device is the latest generation, the third generation Fire TV, that little pendant one. Got it sitting back here. That little pendant Fire TV, that is the only one that's running Fire OS 6. That one is based on a completely different version of Android, at its core. I have a Fire TV app that I know when that came out, running a new version of Android, it was a bit of a headache and a bit of a scramble to get my app working on that, because things changed significantly. It took me like 4 different software version releases to get things locked down, because I'd fix something, I'd release, and then I'd realize something else is still broken, I'd fix it, release. So if the OS is different in any way whatsoever, I can understand an app not being supported for one but being supported for the other. But that is absolutely just not the case here with the Fire TV 1, even the Fire TV Stick 1. Like I'm saying, the Fire TV Stick 1, it's a weaker device, but it's still running the exact same OS, the exact same software capabilities. There's just no difference. There's honestly no reason right now to drop support.
Maybe, fingers crossed, when the new DIRECTV Now DVR version 2, whatever, becomes official. We'll learn why, but that may be, who knows, that could be tomorrow, that could be June, they may delay it again past spring. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, we will.
All right, the next story up is Philo has officially announced support for the Apple TV, Fire TV coming this summer, and finally Android. I believe it's Android phones. I want to say Android tablets have support already. It's very weird. Android was announced earlier but never came. Apple TV's been announced for a while, never came, and now we're hearing about the Fire TV for summer 2018. Have you tested out Philo, Elias?
I have not. Excuse me. I have not. I focus mostly on the Fire TV stuff, so until the service is available on the Fire TV, I tend to ignore it.
Yeah, it has been a weird lag. And I just looked, it's not on Android, I believe, tablets either.
I don't think so.
Android in total, which was announced when it first launched, is finally, I guess, going to get support. But it's owned by a joint partnership of Discovery, which also includes Scripps now, Viacom, AMC, and I want to say, is it A&E? Am I missing?
A&E is definitely involved. Is it jointly owned by them, or are they just investors? I don't know. I don't know too much about this company. I haven't looked at it too much. I thought they were just investors. Oh.
They all have a say now, or a part ownership, I believe, but I don't think they all have a say. It's like Hulu right now. Comcast is involved with it, but because of the terms of their purchase of NBC Universal, they don't get a daily vote in what happens with Hulu in the day-to-day business. I think that changes here in a few months, though, with Hulu. But yeah, $16, you get a ton of channels, and you get it for $20. You want to bump up to that level, you get even more. A lot of small ones like Nicktoons, MTV Live, which is a network I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, me neither.
Destination America, BT Her, AHC. I'm not familiar with that one either.
It definitely seems like the $16 37 channel plan is the one to go with. I mean, unless you're diehard fans of something Destination America, but I bet you they're pushing their smaller $16 plan. But it is definitely a nice little selection, for someone like me who's not a huge sports fan. We used to always bring this up when we did the actual cord cutting show podcast. But this is kind of like right up my alley. Just a nice little selection of channels that has a wide variety of content, a lot of educational type content on there. As much educational as you can get as far as network television. But and then for just $16, it's a nice little grouping there. Excited to give them a shot once they actually do come to the Fire TV.
One thing I think is interesting, and we talked about earlier, so this is perfect, is the idea that everybody expects that these companies have a massive budget, right? A massive team of developers. You have a lot more software development. What is like an average team that works on a project at this size look like?
I mean, it could literally be as small as like, 5 or 6 guys, or girls, it doesn't have to be big. I mean, it can grow astronomically. Obviously, there could be hundreds of people working on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are tiny. Mostly because I was really surprised when I first started hearing about this Philo service. A few months ago, I shot their little generic press email account an email asking when or if Fire TV version was in the works, and to my surprise, the CEO himself responds to my email telling me, yeah, we're working on it. I'll be sure to let you know when it's actually released, or when it's, when we get closer. And like, that kind of shows you, I have a feeling they are a very small, little tight group of people working behind this service. If the CEO is responding to the generic press email address, which with many companies never gets a response, period, if you're lucky to get anything back. And in my case, I'm just one little dude running one stupid little site. So, but I mean, that, my respect for the company shot up when the CEO himself actually, emailed me. And then after, a couple of days ago, when this news about a Fire TV app coming out, hit all the websites, he emailed me telling me it's going to be available soon, and if I wanted to get in on the beta once it's available. And so, I think it's a small group, which is probably to their advantage at this point, especially when the market is getting really competitive. We just talked about the big four, the Hulu, Sling TV, DIRECTV, and PlayStation View. Those are all big major companies backed by big major, networks. And these guys, I think, looking at their history, they started out as like a college-only thing out of a Harvard incubator, just a little startup, and now they've kind of grown, and now it seems like they've got backing of some of the smaller, big network companies, relative to the big guys like Disney and those things. They're not involved, but they probably don't have too many people. I mean, I'm looking here, 67 employees. It says that's not big at all, for a company like this.
Probably most of them are in like ad sales, and because even though you're watching like AMC, some of those ad blocks are being filled by Philo. Sling fills some of them and so forth. That's how they make a lot of their money. So I would be surprised if 20 to 30 of that staff is ad sales.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Hey, let's move on to the final story of the day, and this is kind of a speculative piece based off of something Netflix CEO Reed Hastings said during his earnings call. He was asked about the possibility of a price hike, and I'll leave in the show notes. You can read the full reply he did, but in short, he basically said, if we want to raise the price, we have to earn it by offering good content. And he clearly left the door wide open to, hey, a price hike may come up here. And in some markets, I believe Australia and others, have already gone up to equivalent of a US $11.99 kind of price range. Would you pay more for Netflix, Elias?
I would. I mean, Netflix gives you a lot of value. I mean, honestly, I'm surprised that I haven't hit that $14.99 mark for the top end 4K plan. It's on a side tangent. I still think it's strange that they break it up into SD, HD, and 4K. Like, is there any major streaming service that still does that? Like, back in the day when 4K was kind of this premium thing, I can understand you were paying extra for it, but when you can buy a 4K TV for like $150, like, it doesn't seem like that thing that you should pay extra for anymore. But that's a side tangent. Maybe you'll chime in there. But yeah, I would pay. I can see $14.99 being like that sweet spot, and then when you cross that, now we're getting a little sketchy.
I think they clearly want to keep the price as low as possible. I mean, they still have that SD only package with one stream on it.
Yeah, why?
So,
but
I think that's the real thing.
Whoever's using it is probably really happy that it's there, because otherwise they're going to be paying $3 more a month.
I do hear a lot of rural people with rural low data caps and lower speeds like to use the SD package off of Netflix because it is slower. Now, you think that Netflix could just say, hey, we offer that option, right? You can downgrade your feed down to SD. But I guess they're trying to get as many subscribers as they can. It does make sense. I mean, 4K costs more money for them to send down the pipe, even with their seeding servers inside hubs at ISPs. I'm sure there is some type of data bandwidth exchange going on there for 4K. But I agree with you. I think Netflix is producing good content. And I love Last Chance U. My wife loves Stranger Things. You know, we would subscribe just during those seasons just to watch those shows. And if they can keep doing that, if they can keep getting major blockbuster shows that make people want. Lost in Space is getting really good replies right now from people. Some mixed reviews. Overall, though, I hear people love it. House of Cards was their first real breakthrough. Now there's a laundry list of different breakthrough first-rate programming you would see on Showtime, HBO, any major network out there. Here's one thing to ask you before we end. What is the price that would say to you, this isn't worth it to me? $14.99? $20.99? What would be too much for you right now?
I mean, $19.99, for example, would probably seriously make me consider dropping it, you know, for a little while and then binge watching, you know, because that's kind of what I do right now with the, you know, the HBOs, the Showtimes, the Cinemaxes, those kind of things. I don't subscribe constantly on a regular basis. I usually, you know, hop in for a few months, binge watch something that, you know, was just released, you know, like on Showtime, Billions was just released. So I don't have a Showtime subscription right now, but I'm sure in the next few months I'll probably hop on for a month or two, get in there, because I don't think their you know, their value is there for a constant, you know, having access to it at all times. But Netflix is definitely there. I want access to Netflix at all times. But if they get into that like $19.99 range, where it's like I can get, you know, for $19.99 you can get the base Sling package, which gives you a whole lot more. But it's kind of what you have value in, because like I initially, honestly, I had more value, and maybe still do, more value in Netflix as like a big movie repository as opposed to a original content, that must-see TV type of repository, you know. Like I see HBO as one of those, and Netflix, I think their CEO has said this, but Netflix as a whole has kind of constantly said that they want to be the next CEO or the next HBO. They want to kind of replace HBO. Whereas I always appreciated Netflix for being that like replacement to a rental video store, you know. I've just got kind of this back catalog of movies that I might feel like watching, you know, mixed in with a bit of new content, and then newer movies will trickle in as, you know, they get a little bit older and, you know, they get out of the rental buying phase. You know, when a movie comes out, it'll take a little while before it, you know, drops out of the, you know, service where you can only get it if you rent or buy it. But yeah, like that's kind of a little discouraging on my part, you know, because I kind of value it for that repository of movies.
I think if Netflix can continue to grow the catalog, both original and, like you said, content from other providers, the Disney deal being a great example of that. If they keep that up, they keep growing it, they can offer you value for that money, I think they could get away with the $14.99, like you said, for their high end. Yeah. Maybe someday for the base if they do a really good job of it. But they need to go and justify that income. If they can't do that, then they're going to be in trouble. So we'll see what happens. And I just want to be clear, just because he says they're thinking of it doesn't mean they're going to do it tomorrow. Yeah. I'll just throw that out there.
It's inevitable. They're going to raise their price at some point, you know, like CEOs will pretty much take two stances on the whole thing. They'll either never mention it until it happens, you know, like if they're asked, they'll always say we're not raising prices right now, and then it'll just kind of, you know, shock everybody when it actually happens. But I give him credit for, you know, actually like saying, yeah, there's a possibility, we're always thinking about it, we're considering it right now, you know, like I give him a little credit for that, you know, that way it's not going to just be a shock when it actually happens, because it's going to happen inevitably, you know, even with, you know, just going by inflation at some point, it's just not going to be enough to make the cut.
All right. Hey, let's wrap this up. First of all, thank you, Elias, for being here.
No problem. It was fun.
Hey, I'll put a link to Elias, AFTVnews.com, and their Twitter account down in the show notes if you want to check out everything they do. Great coverage there on all things Amazon Fire TV. And really, you kind of cover everything Amazon nowadays, don't you?
Yeah. I definitely focus on Fire TV, but there's only so much Fire TV news that can go around. So whenever I've been covering a lot of the Amazon Alexa stuff. So I'm sorry if I just triggered a whole bunch of people's devices, but I always try not to say that word. But yeah, I cover that a lot now because it seems like there's a lot more happening in that space. So whenever I don't have something to cover about Fire TV, I cover that space. So if you've got any of Amazon's hardware, I definitely have probably something that'll interest you.
All right, and to all the viewers, I want to know, would you pay more for Netflix? What would be that break-even point? As Netflix stands today, if they said, the content you got today is what's going to look for, like, in the future, what would you pay for that if you had to pay more? Let us know. I'd love to hear from you. But check back next week. Every Friday, we post a recap show. Hopefully, sometime in the future, we'll get Elias to drop by again as a guest. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week.
See you.